Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Through the Fire. I am your host, Ryan Wickline, and today we're joined by a very special guest. She's a communications and boundaries coach, Miss Tannera Lindvall. How you doing today, Tannera?
Hi, Ryan. I'm doing great. I'm excited to connect with your audience, and thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited to hear where you got to go with this because I think we all lack in these two areas, having healthy communication, setting boundaries.
It's definitely been a process of learning, and I think we always are, right? We can always learn how to do things better. None of us are perfect. Even as a coach, I'm not perfect, but it is fun to just go on the journey with people and learn, right?
Yeah. So the number one question the audience is probably wondering, who is Tannera Lindvall?
Awesome. Well, Tannera Lindvall, I live in Colorado. So I think a lot of my story and really how I became a communication and boundaries coach just started with me having to go through a journey of understanding that I wasn't communicating well. One of my biggest desires in life is I love seeing people come together. Really, I think this is what excites me when people are like, hey, what trips your trigger? What gets you excited? I think reconciliation, when people who have been alienated or they've gone through a hard time and then they come back together, right? This has been a huge theme of my life, just a desire to see the bridge be built between people. And this is where I began to learn that every time you need to build a bridge or you want to see reconciliation happen, it has to start with a conversation. So learning communication, how do we communicate? What are we saying? How are we speaking it? How are we connecting with the other person? Just became a big theme of learning to increase my vocabulary, learning how to communicate and saying things not only in kindness, but sometimes with a boundary. And we're having to set boundaries in order to ensure that we have healthy connection or healthy reconciliation that's needed, right? So I think, who is Tannera Lindvall? She's the girl that gets excited about reconciliation. She's the girl that gets excited about seeing relationships thrive in all forms of relationships, right? And, whether it's, a husband and a wife, whether it's with your parents or with your children or with your friends, I believe all relationships have a purpose and we need each other. We need community. And that's the big passion that really drives me, is just bringing reconciliation back into people's lives.
Nice. So what inspired you to start coaching?
That's awesome. So honestly, it kind of came by default. And what I mean by that is just as I worked on myself, just learning how to communicate better, how to set healthy boundaries, how to communicate those boundaries, it just became evident to the people I do life with, right? To my community, to friends and acquaintances or friends of friends. So it just began to be where I started getting known as the air quote boundaries girl, not in a bad way, but they're like, no, you need to learn how to set a boundary. Go talk to Tannera. She knows what she's doing. And so people started pursuing me and saying, hey, can I just take you out to lunch? Can I take you to coffee? I need to just pick your brain. I need to learn how to do this. And so they began just seeking me out for just counsel on it. And now also just to kind of help. So I am a leadership coach certified through John Maxwell, but I'm also emotional intelligence coach certified as well. So I went through all of these, not necessarily to like start a business, but because I was so hungry for my own growth and change and to see reconciliation and different things take place in my life. And so I went and pursued these things for my own growth. But what was amazing about it is it became so effective to the people around me that now they started to pursue me for it. And then it got to a point where I was like, you know what? I think I need to make a business out of this because there's more people that I could reach and share this with and help them establish and reconcile back with others, or learn how to give a guilt-free no and setting a healthy boundary and stop the people-pleasing cycle. And just being able to share that out with the world just to help bring people back to that place of saying, hey, I want to have healthy, thriving relationships. And that starts with communication and how to set healthy boundaries.
Yeah, so true. What types of services do you provide?
That's awesome. So I'm actually getting ready to launch a program specifically for single women, single Christian women who say, hey, I have a desire for a husband, but I don't know how to get there. Or how do I even get to it? So that's a program I'm about to launch, actually coming up here pretty soon. just to help women walk through that transformation process, right? Because before I think we need to be stepping into a relationship, sometimes it's that self-work we need to do, right? Am I attracting the kind of person that I want, right? Because sometimes it's that place that we're not necessarily at that place that we're believing healthy, thinking healthy, communicating healthy, or we still have maybe some hurts in our past that are stopping us from moving forward. So that's one of the services. My main service that I offer, and this is the one I do currently and I've been doing for years, is communication coaching and boundaries coaching. So I allow people, so you can go to my website, communicationarchitect.org. I've got the different programs on there. You can check it out. You can book a discovery call with me to say, hey, which program is right for me, if it's something you want to move forward with. But the goal is to help people increase their vocabulary, increase their communication skills. Because the truth is what happens is if we don't increase our language or our vocabulary, it limits how we process and how we think. And if it's limiting how we process and think, right, it limits how we can communicate, how we interpret a situation. And so one of the things I like to encourage people is kind of thinking about this. You may have this grand vision for your life to say, hey, I want to make 6 figures in a year. I have this big vision for my business, which is great. But how we communicate that, right? How we process when something happens in our lives. We may say, well, this was a bad thing that happened and, I just feel angry. But our only way to process what happened is I feel angry. And then we realize, well, if you just feel angry and that's how you're telling yourself, it's going to limit how you respond in the moment or how you see the pathway forward. Versus, let's break down angry. Do you feel frustrated? Do you feel disappointed? Do you feel right? So we try to add different vocabulary to it that allows us to interpret in a way that gives us a path forward that moves us towards our goal. And so in a lot of my coaching, that's kind of the breakdown that we'll do is we'll examine a situation. How can we see it different? Do we need to increase our vocabulary here? Because if we increase our vocabulary, we increase the possibilities of our future and what we can accomplish. And then I also do a lot of goal setting coaching as well. So that means you come in and you say, man, I have a vision, but I don't know how to get there. So we actually line out a path how to get there. We hold out not only like the boundaries within your life to be able to accomplish it, but how do I communicate those boundaries with the community, the family around me to get their support so that you're doing it with your community and not having to feel like it's you against them. Because sometimes in our goal setting, we can feel that way, right? We're like, well, I really want to get this done, but now I'm making enemies of my family and other people because they always want my time. And I'm really trying to give my time to my goal. So how do we have both? Because you can absolutely have strong, healthy relationships and a strong, healthy family while at the same time still working towards your goal. And the way we do that is how we communicate those boundaries, how we invite people into that goal and trust that they have good intent towards us. Right. So again, those are just pieces that I do a lot of coaching with. So a lot of goal setting, a lot of communication, how we communicate, boundary setting, and then time management as well. So all of that kind of comes in to that package. And that's the majority of the people that I coach right now are people that essentially have a goal that they want to accomplish, but they need assistance. And how do I get there? What's the pathway to get there? And how do I invite my family, my community, my friends into this so that I'm not worried about losing relationships in the process, right? So that's a lot of what I do. And I really love it. It's just so fun to see people walk through and accomplish their goals that they've had in their vision and in their heart to do.
Yeah. How do you get people to, I like how you talk about increasing your vocabulary. How do you get your clients to start increasing their vocabulary?
No, it's excellent. Well, honestly, I'll just go back to elementary. What is the first thing you're taught in elementary school to increase your vocabulary? Read. Read more. Now, I'll say this. I'm not a big sit down and read a book person, but I love audiobooks. And audiobooks is a great way nowadays to increase our vocabulary, right? And honestly, not being afraid of the big words, but also I think for me, the biggest piece of increasing our vocabulary is reflection, because growth comes through reflection. So if I'm hitting a moment where I'm like, hey, I need to process a situation or an emotion I'm feeling, right? So I can get control of it and not let the emotion control me because I'm in control of my life. That's the thing I think a lot of us need help with is we have an experience or we have a feeling and then we let actions come out of that feeling. So our feelings are now controlling our actions and then we're not getting the result we want. And we wonder why. Well, it's because we let our emotions control our actions, right? So I really feel like the big part of, again, the vocabulary piece is if I have an emotion, like I shared earlier, and I said, I'm angry. If I stopped and said, well, let me ask myself some questions. This is really important. If we can ask ourselves about 3 to 5 what or how questions deep, we can get to the root of something, right? So let's say a situation happened with my husband and I was like, oh, he made me so mad, right? It's like, okay, what about that situation made you mad, Tannera? Well, I expected him to take out the trash and he didn't. Okay, right. I'm just going to throw an idea out there. So, oh, it made me mad and now it's stinking up the house, right? Well, I asked myself, what about it made me mad? It's like, well, he didn't do what I expected him to do. Now I can ask myself the question, did you communicate? Did you ask him, not tell, did you ask him to take out the trash? Did you ask him to take it out yesterday? Or did you just say, hey, whenever you have a chance, take it out? And then I'm going to tell you all the places I'm like, he had a chance 15 times, right? Versus, did I communicate an expectation? So now that I'm asking myself questions and I'm getting logical with myself, because this is the other piece to understand is when we have that emotional feeling, and again, feelings aren't bad, they're good, right? But we can't trust them. We have to process them. Okay. So now I'm getting to say, well, you felt angry. Well, now we're going to define that and increase the vocabulary and find out what made it angry. So really now what I'm discovering is I had an expectation that I didn't communicate. And it made me upset. And why did it make me upset? Well, now I have an unmet expectation, which created disappointment or frustration. So that's kind of the increasing of the vocabulary, if that helps make sense. But it's processing through that moment to think, can I add other words to this besides just you made me mad or I'm so angry about that, right? Okay, the other words I can add to it is, man, I had some unmet expectations. So now how can I handle it if I know I have disappointment from unmet expectations? Well, first thing I have to own is my behavior. I made an expectation I didn't communicate. That's on me. So now I can communicate it different, right? Now it gives me a future. It's bringing reconciliation to the relationship versus just creating more frustration, right? But now the other piece is now I can invite him into my frustration, but I get to invite him in by saying, hey, here's what I expected. I apologize that I didn't own communicating that well, or maybe I did communicate it, but it came out like a barking command versus an invitation or an ask to be part of this, or saying, hey, is that realistic? Would you be able to take out the trash today before 4 p.m.? And then he can agree. He can say, yeah, actually, sure, I can do that for you. Or, hey, I can't, I've got a call with a client at that time. Can I take it out after? Right? Now we've got an agreement. And because we have an agreement we can manage, we can have ease and peace in our relationship. So that increasing my vocabulary of understanding the emotion to go from angry to disappointed to why am I disappointed? It was an unmet expectation. Now I have a solution that leads to reconciliation, right? Or that leads to making sure we're connecting and not losing each other in the process, right? Does that help?
Yeah, I figured that's what you were going to say was reading. I didn't know, but that's what I figured. But
Yeah.
I like how you kind of toned it down each time and said, because anger is such a powerful emotion compared to like, oh, I'm disappointed or frustrated, and you kind of toned it down each time, which takes a lot of the emotion out of it.
Absolutely. And I think you absolutely hit on a great point is the toning of it down. And so it's not to make less of a situation, but typically what happens, especially as our emotions get involved. And again, I'm going to say this, emotions aren't bad. They're a good thing, but we can't just trust our initial emotion. We have to be able to examine it, process it, and discover what is the true word that belongs here, not just the initial feeling, right? And so again, as we do that, it does increase our vocabulary because it makes us question ourselves. And I think it's good to sometimes question our emotions and say, okay, what about that is bothering me? And why is it bothering me that way? So what could I do if my goal is to make sure that we're crossing the bridge towards each other and not moving away from each other? And I think this is important to understand that. And this bleeds into the boundaries part of what I do with people. But I said, the reason I think that's important is because I think many people, and the way our minds are developed, we have our amygdala, which is our fight or flight, right? That's the protective moment. We've probably heard that before. But then we also have a prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking brain. And so what happens when emotion comes in is we move out of our prefrontal cortex, our thinking brain, and we shift into our amygdala, which is our fight or flight brain. Now, in today's society, we don't have as much, I'm not saying there can't be, but we just don't have as much external threat. right? We don't have a lot of this threat of somebody's going to try to come attack me. I mean, every now and then saying that can't happen, but for the most part, it doesn't. What typically happens is now it's more of an emotional threat. And what I mean by that is, man, I don't like the way you made me feel. I don't like the way you said that, or I don't like the way they wrote that on social media, right? It's almost this social type threat that comes at us. Now there's two ditches, there's fight and there's flight. And then there's the middle of the road where we communicate and build bridges. And so we typically do when we have a conversation with someone. And again, just kind of telling that story, and I love my husband. He's so great to let me tell on him. If we have a moment where I'm like, I can't believe you just said that. And oh my gosh, like I feel angry, or you didn't take out the trash, right? Just using it as an example. The ditches I can fall in is fight or flight. Now, flight, what it looks like in today's society is that I'm going to come straight out and attack you, right? I'm going to tell you how I feel and how wrong you are. And I'm assuming bad intent on the other person's part, right? And I'm telling you this is that 99.9% of the time, people don't have bad intent. They just had a negative impact because of their behavior, but their intent wasn't necessarily bad. And so what ends up happening is we run into one of the ditches. Either we go into the ditch where we're going to go all out and attack, or we fall into the silence ditch where it's, I'm going to withdraw because I don't want conflict. I'm a peacekeeper, right? I don't want conflict. So I'm just not going to say anything. But what happens is now we stew on it. It stays inside and that emotion stews and we tell ourselves an internal story. And now we're going down a pathway that's inevitably going to end up in an explosion later on. And someone's going to say, where did that come from? Because it just sat there and it culminated. And so what I encourage people to do is being able to say, hey, I need to process this emotion so that it doesn't become a fight or flight moment. It doesn't become I'm going to go all out banshee war on this, or I'm going to go silent. And then part of that boundary piece is being able to understand, like, let me communicate this in this way. So let's say the issue was my husband didn't take out the trash as I expected. I had to go through the process, examine my emotions, give it new verbiage. So I'm not saying angry. I'm now saying disappointed. But why am I disappointed? I have an unmet expectation. Disappointment comes through unmet expectation. That's exactly what it is. And when we can, again, lessen that, just like you said, Ryan, when we start to lessen that, it now allows me to get into my thinking brain to say, okay, I don't need to run in my amygdala and my emotions. My goal is for us to cross the bridge to each other. So let me kind of help tamper down some of these emotions, find new verbiage for it so I can process how to cross the bridge. Right. So now the conversation with my husband is one, I will own my part. Hey, I didn't communicate this, or I did communicate it, but I didn't give you my expectation of it was going to be done today. Right. And so you just thought, sure, I'll take it out and I'll take it out tomorrow. Right. He may have made a plan in his head. We didn't communicate on it, did we? And so now I get to say, but would you mind taking out the trash by 4 p.m.? Because I'd like to have it out before, so it's empty and ready for dinner, right? In a sense that all the trash we have to throw away then. So I can communicate those things. So we come back together on that bridge, right? It creates a bridge of communication. And then as we do that, it allows us, that is in essence, setting a boundary, right? You communicate what you need, but you also ask the other person, hey, is this realistic? You're inviting them into it. You're not demanding it of them, right? Part of that setting the boundaries, hey, here's what I would like to expect of you. Is that agreeable? Is that acceptable? Is that reasonable to what you have going on in your life at this time and what you have scheduled? Then they can come meet you, right? We're kind of crossing the bridge together and say, you know what? Yep, I can do that. Not a problem. Or, hey, I can't do that, but what I can do is, right? So what's the alternate? And then you say, okay, great. Now we're meeting across the bridge. We're making an agreement. We've set a boundary and we've agreed on that boundary. And now if that boundary doesn't get met, now I have an agreement I can bring back to the table and just say, hey, love, I know you said you were going to get the trash out by 4. I just want to remind you it's 5 and it hasn't gone out. Can you do that now? But I'm not making it in a sense about him. I'm making it about the agreement. You agreed. This is what you said. Could you do that? Right. And now because he did agree, he's now like, yeah, I did say that, didn't I? Right. So there's a piece he has to own up to. And so, and again, this goes both ways. But again, that goal is if we set the agreement, we set the boundary in an agreement, we both have agreed to it. Now we can move forward. So I don't know, I'm probably talking a lot here, Ryan, but feel free to jump in. But yeah, really was just to kind of share the process of how we communicate, how the boundaries are, and getting new vocabulary into our emotions and into those experiences so that we can allow ourselves to get to our thinking brain.
What are some signs that people need to set like stronger boundaries in their life?
Oh gosh, I will say probably like me. So I tell people, I was like, man, I'm a recovering people pleaser. So I really grew up. I don't know if you guys did this as well. I grew up being voluntold, where my mom would volunteer me for things. So I didn't volunteer; she volunteered me, and so then I was told to do it. So I was like, I call it voluntold. And so there was just a lot in my life. Just part of my journey and story was going from a place of always being told to volunteer, serving and volunteering. And let me say this, volunteering's good. I don't want volunteering to get a bad rap for anything. But what I was doing is I was volunteering so much that I will be honest, there was a season in my life I got over 400 pounds. My health was suffering. I was in bad health because I was constantly pleasing other people. Hey, what do you need? I'll serve you. What do you need? And there was a portion of my desire was to be able to say to them like, hey, I want the best for you. I want to help you. You need this. You're going to move. You need somebody to come help you move. I'm 100% here for you. But then there was another piece that I got a lot of my acceptance and my value from knowing I made other people happy. Like if I made you happy, all right, good. Then I know you like me and I know I'm accepted. That was the deeper root issue. And so when you say, how does somebody know that they need boundaries in their life? Well, number one, what parts of your life are suffering because you're saying yes to too many things? Because this is what happens is every time we give our yes to something, there are automatic no's also placed into it. And so being able to discover like, wait, I'm giving my yes a lot here and my family's suffering for it. Let me tell you, this happens a lot with people I've worked with where maybe they love their community, they love their church, they love whatever they're involved in so much or their job even. And they're giving their yes and they're overworking or overcommitting. And then they get home and their family gets the leftovers. Their family gets the part where it's like, man, I'm exhausted. I've been giving all day. I'm tired. I don't want to give anymore. And the kids come up screaming or the husband needs something, right? Or whatever the situation is. And now we have no grace or no patience for our own family because we're just exhausted because we said yes to too many other things. The other thing we'll notice is our health starts to lack because we will sacrifice ourselves, right? Sometimes before we sacrifice other people or before we'll say no to someone else, we'll say no to ourselves. And then our health lacks, right? And so if our health is starting to go down because we're saying yes to too many other things, hey, we're out of balance, right? So that's one ditch. The other ditch of where we know we need healthy boundaries are the people who say, I have strong boundaries, but really what they are what I call walls. They use their boundaries as an excuse to not allow people to get close, to not allow for those deep connections or relationships in their life. Now, you don't need 10 million friends, right? You don't need 10 million deep relationships, but you do need some connections and deep relationships in your life. We're created to live in community. We need each other. None of us are created to be alone or to live alone. Like we're created to have relationships. And so when we start to build these high towers and walls and become so strict that we don't even want to give our name to somebody, right? Because I've met these people where it's just like you're talking to me, you're like, hey, yeah, what's your name? And you're like, rather not say. I'm like, okay, no worries. I mean, I can just call you Joe, but sometimes people just get too restrictive. And I'm like, hey, that right there shows me that there's probably a hurt in your life that has caused you to say, I'm going to build my walls and protect myself. We start to use the phrases like never again. Never again will I let that happen. Never again will I give somebody this access to my life. And that verbiage shows us, hey, we've gone to the other side where our walls are so high, they are not letting good, genuine relationships in. So if you're in either ditch, you definitely need boundaries because the goal of boundaries is to bring you to a place where you can have genuine connection with people, but you're protecting your yes to your health, your yes to your family, and your yes to your biggest priorities, right? So can you do other things and help other people and love your children and take care of your family? Absolutely. But it should never be at the expense of your health. It should never be at the expense of whatever that goal or that vision is that you have. It's just how do we architect it into our lives? And that's the art form I get to help a lot of people with in coaching.
Yeah, I think that was one of the hardest things for me to learn because at one point I was kind of a big people pleaser too. It's okay to say no to people and chase your own dreams, and you don't have to give everything to somebody else's dreams.
You're absolutely right. And I will say this. So for anybody listening, I have a free download for you. So if you go to my site, communicationarchitect.org, go to the resources tab. It's free resources, but I have free downloads in there. One of them is how to give a guilt-free no. Because that's the biggest issue, right? Is we feel like I need to say no, or maybe you've recognized where you need to say no, but now you struggle with, but how do I do it and not feel guilty after, right? Or worry about that guilt coming. So that guide is it's just as simple. I think it's like a 7-page guide. You can do it in like 10 minutes, but just to walk you through how do I give a guilt-free no in this area or this thing, this line I need to put in. Because typically what we do, and Ryan, you might have done this, but when you get a point, you have to tell someone no, we tend to over-explain. Well, but you have to understand. Well, let me tell you why, right? And the truth is we don't have to, right? We can simply say, hey, thank you for inviting me. Unfortunately, I'm not available. Done, right? Hey, thank you for asking me to help. I hope you find somebody you need, but unfortunately, I'm not able to help you, right? We can actually just leave it there and we don't have to over-explain because it's that guilt within us that's like, oh, I probably should say yes, or they need me to say yes. I really don't want to say yes. I don't have time to say yes, whatever. And then we feel guilty and then we over-explain. The other person doesn't care. They just want a yes or a no so they can move on and find someone else. Or they want the over-explain so they can say, how can I help you help me? Where can I move your schedule around so you can do what I need to do? Right? So again, sometimes we just need to have a little bit shorter of a no so that way we can close the door to it and move on.
Yeah. So is that what you kind of suggest is kind of looking like what's the most important priorities in your life? And that's what you need to protect. So anything that's going to go against that has to be a no.
Right. So the easiest thing I tell people is the first thing you need to learn before you learn how to say no and even put boundaries in place, you have to know your yes. Right. And let me encourage you that your yes has to constantly be re-examined as the season in your life shifts. Right. So let me give you an example. So when I was single, I got to say yes and hang out with friends all the time. Right. Then I got married. So all of a sudden I have a yes now to my marriage where I'm like, ooh, I can't just run around and do everything I want to do with my friends like I used to, right? Can I still spend time with them? Absolutely. But it's going to look different now because I'm in a new season, right? Or maybe you have a job change and you go from like, some things you used to be able to do. This job maybe needs a little more time. It's a promotion. You have to move up and think higher levels and take some training. So there's other things in your life you're going to have to say no to protect your yes to growing in that promotion into that job, right? So as we're moving into new seasons, what is your yes, right? If you're married and you have a family and you say, I really don't want my family to be sacrificed on the altar of my career. So how do I balance saying yes to my career, but making sure my family doesn't lose priority, right? So you have to determine what are my yeses to. And then I like to rank them because I'm like, okay, so I don't want things to sacrifice. I want to figure out how to architect them into my life. But as I'm figuring that out, if I have competing priorities, it's good for me to know which one ranks over. So I work a full-time job. I'm running my coaching business. And then I'm also a book writing coach for another company. So I actually help people write their books. So I've got 3 different things going on, but I'm married. And so when I start looking at like, okay, I've got all of these priorities, I will be honest with you. So I'm a believer. And so my number 1 is relationship with God and spending time with him. But then my second one is my husband. It's like, all right, I want to fully be present for my husband, which means my life is well scheduled. But it's when I'm with him, I'm with him. I'm not thinking about my job, not thinking about my coaching program or other things. I'm fully present. What does he need? How do I serve him? How do I fully be present to build and continue our relationship and connection together, right? But then let's say I've got competing priorities as well. So I've got my jobs. And there are times that, especially in my job world, where I can have something at my 9 to 5 that needs attention. Then I have something in my coaching business or my others. Well, right now, my 9 to 5 is a higher priority because that's the main source of income, right? So you're like, okay, that's the priority. We're going to make sure that work gets done. And then the others layer under it. And then I'm able to communicate with my husband. He knows the other factors, where they fit in. We're able to negotiate where his time is and where the time is for these other things. But if something comes up, because this is life, right? You're moving along life, everything's fine. And then you get sideswiped on a random Tuesday. You're like, this did not plan for this. That's where the priorities really come in, where I'm like, hey, I didn't plan on this, but my husband called and this happened and I have work time, I'm supposed to be doing this. Well, I'm sorry, priority wise, my husband's going to take priority. So I'm going to have to let my boss know, or I'm going to have to let my client know, I'm going to have to stop this. I need to go handle this over here. Right. And that's where the priorities and yeses help. Especially when you just get sideswiped on a random Tuesday and something comes up you didn't plan on. How do I work it in? Well, does it fit? And the other piece is when you get invited to things, right? That maybe you're fun, maybe you're not fun, but you can get invited to be a part of something, volunteer in something, or maybe your job says, hey, can you take on overtime? And you say, well, man, I'd love to have the money on overtime, but does it fit in the season I'm working in, right? Can I negotiate with my other priorities to see where it fits? Or do I need to decline it and say, I'm sorry, I can't do overtime this week, right? So this is where, again, knowing what your yes is to will be easier to protect your no, because your no now has a reason, right? So when you know your yes, you know those priorities, then when something comes up that is going to be a distraction or pull away, or it doesn't fit into the architecture of your yes, then you're able to say, hey, thank you so much for the invitation, or thank you for the opportunity, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to decline. Hope you find the right person, right? Or however you need to end it. But you can say it very simply, because the power of your no rests in knowing your yes.
I love it. What role does shame play in the way we communicate, set boundaries, or avoid conflict?
It's a good one. So I will say this: shame. I hate it so much. I'm actually writing a book called Breaking Up with Shame. I'll let you know when it's out. But shame really does come in as part of that guilt factor, right? So when we're in relationships, and I have a pretty long story. I was in a long relationship where we were engaged, and it didn't work out. Praise God. But in the season, it was a tough one, because after we broke up, I went through quite a spiral of shame of what I did wrong, and we start doing this self-examination after maybe it's a missed job opportunity, or maybe it's one of those opportunities you had and you didn't do it right. And then we start self-examining, but we self-examine in a negative light. And what we start to do is we start saying, man, I wish I wouldn't have done this. I should have done this. I can't believe I didn't do that. And those woulda, shoulda, couldas start to become a spiral of guilt and shame, right? Or condemnation, really. So this is how I like to express it, right? So guilt, if you can, let me give a definition to what guilt is. All right. So this is my definition of guilt. Guilt should help me recognize when something was done wrong, that's not right, when it's behavioral, right? It's an action. And that something done wrong needs to be corrected. Okay. So if guilt comes in to say, ooh, that may not have been the best action, Tannera. I think you need to go own up. You need to apologize, and you need to make a shift. Or maybe the situation's past. I can't really necessarily go and apologize for it, right? Relationship's done, or it would make it worse if you tried to open it up, but you need to be able to release it. It's that place of, can I acknowledge that the action was wrong, right? Shame comes in, and it takes the action and it makes it personal. It turns it into who you are and your identity. And so shame will come in and say, hey, it's not that thing you did was wrong. You're wrong. You're a bad person. You're no good. I can't believe you did that. You're so gross and dirty and low, and right? Whatever lies it wants to come in. Shame wants to come and attack your very identity, your worth, and your value. And guilt should only come in to warn you of like, hey, that probably wasn't good. Let's make a correction, right? Let's do a behavioral shift. And so this is the thing that when we talk about where does shame kind of come in, it comes in through that place of we open the door first through self-evaluation. Now, self-evaluation is actually really good. It's not a bad thing. But can we control our self-talk in that self-evaluation? Can we evaluate behavior without attaching it to our worth, our value, or our identity? Right? And we all do this, right? We all spiral and think, I did that bad thing. Man, I can't believe I'm such a horrible person. Why would I edit it? Right? But we have to capture that moment and just say, okay, wait a minute. Shame is trying to take over here. And when shame takes over, man, we spiral. And that's a hard thing sometimes to get out of. So sometimes we need that slap in the face to be like, you're not a bad person, Tannera. You just did a bad thing. So we're going to own up to it, right? And we're going to make the apologies where applicable. Because again, some relationships or some situations, you might be like, it'll get worse if I try to reopen this door. So we're going to let it lie, but I'm going to acknowledge it and I'm going to adjust my behavior moving forward. Right. So you just have to know the situation on that one. But Again, it's that place of not allowing ourselves to spiral into shame. And again, shame goes after your identity, your worth, and your value, whereas guilt can come in and just adjust and basically just make you notice of, hey, that behavior wasn't good. Let's adjust that behavior. Does that kind of help, Ryan?
Yeah. And it's a cycle too. Once you get stuck in that cycle, it will keep coming back.
And it will. And the thing is it really does. That's why I love to help give people tools to say, hey, recognize it for what it is. And now we're going to step out of it, right? It doesn't have to be a hard thing. I think the hardest thing is thinking about what we're thinking about, right? Because where we spiral is everything is right here. Man, between these two ears, this is our biggest problem. Is our mind, what we think. It's the stories that we tell ourselves, right? So we have a bad situation or a bad encounter, and we start going through and telling ourselves, like, one, whether it's spiraling on ourselves in shame or spiraling on another person, like, I can't believe they do that. They're such a horrible person. Now we're attaching an identity to them. We're telling ourselves a story rather than, man, that behavior wasn't great. Man, how can I bridge the gap with them? Maybe we should have a discussion about that behavior and how it's unacceptable because it's unbecoming to who they are versus, man, that's who they are. Right. So again, even recognizing what is the self-talk? What do we speak to ourselves? What are we speaking about other people? And the reality is most of us will be nice to other people and kind, and we're so mean to ourselves. We mistreat and abuse ourselves so bad. And so can we get a hold of that? I mean, we can, but will we do the work? I should say it that way. Will we do the work to get a hold of our self-talk and say, you know what, this is unproductive to moving forward towards my goal, my vision, and what's in my heart to do?
Yeah. What are some practical steps a person can take before having a difficult conversation with a spouse, friend, family member, or leader?
That's good. So I'd say some practical steps that we can take first. I think I shared a lot of it in this story with my husband in the trash, right? So I always say before you step into a conversation, self-examine. Right. So like in the story of the trash, right? As soon as I had the emotion of like, oh my gosh, I'm so mad at him, right? I was like, oh, wait a minute. Let's reflect on that emotion. All right. So what about that, Tannera, makes you so angry? Well, I feel disappointed that he didn't take out the trash like I expected him to, right? Ooh, okay. So disappointment. Hey, that's not as bad, right? So we self-reflect and get better vocabulary, increasing our vocabulary in what we're experiencing. I want to take this back real quick. So I had said earlier, about 99.9% of the people have good intention, but we're just experiencing their impact. So this is the reality of this scenario, right? So I know my husband has good intention for me, but the impact he had on me in the moment was negative. Was it his intention to have a negative impact on me? No, not at all. And this is something we do have to learn. We have to learn how to start setting good intention on the other person. So before you go in to have the hard conversation or have the corrective behavior conversation, you need to actually examine and say, wait a minute, they are for me, right? They're not against you. And honestly, guys, I'm sorry. I don't know how many people are out there saying, no, they're truly an evil person. Okay, well, if they're one of the 0.1% in the world or whatever, possibly, but most likely they're for you. Most likely they don't have a bad intent. All right. So just set it, just assume it going into the conversation that they do not have a bad intent. But there was a negative impact of behavior that took place. And we can address behavior without attacking identity or without attacking value or worth in another person, right? And so I like to self-examine first. All right, I'm examining my emotions. Okay, I'm feeling disappointed. All right, so now I can actually think through, okay, well, what disappointed me about that? Well, I expected for him to do it this, and this way. But honestly, what's the reality, Tannera? Hey, Tannera, you didn't communicate by when. You did ask him to take the trash out and he agreed, but you never agreed by when. And my expectation was that you would have gotten it done before dinner or at least before the night was over. I never asked him, though, if that was possible. So now when I go to have a behavior conversation, now I can say, okay, first of all, good intent, right? He's my husband. He loves me. He wouldn't have married me if he didn't love me, right? All right. So we're going to assume good intent here. So now I can come up and say, hey, I know I asked you to take out the trash and I don't want to be a bother on this, but I noticed you hadn't taken it out yet. When were you thinking you wanted to take it out? What was your plan? What was in your head? Really, right? So now I'm inviting him into a conversation. I'm asking a question as you're stepping into those hard conversations. Ask for the other person's thoughts. Hey, how did you see this? What were your thoughts behind it? What was your side? So before I start sharing, I expected you to do this. Why didn't you do it? Right? It's that place of saying, you know what? Help me see your side. I want to actually bridge the gap here. Because again, the goal here is to come together, right? We're going to bridge the gap, not stay in the ditches. And so now I invite him into a conversation. We're gonna be like, oh, well, yeah, I know, but I was thinking I could just take it out in the morning, right? So I'm like, okay, so he already had a plan, but neither of us communicated. So again, how much happens because we're not communicating? So now we're in a conversation. Now we can actually genuinely come to an agreement. And I can say, okay, I understand that. I think I was hoping for you to take it out by dinner time. Would that be possible? Is it realistic for me to ask that of you? Right. And then now he can respond and he can say, yeah, I just didn't know that's what you wanted. Okay, great. I'll take it out for you. I'll go do it now. Right. Was actually his response. But he also could have responded because he runs his own businesses as well. And he could have said, hey, I understand that, but honestly, when I got home, I had to jump on a call. And so I wasn't going to be able to take it out before dinner. But you know what I could do is I could take it out after, right? So now it gives him an opportunity to have that conversation. So again, self-reflect first, make sure we help bring down that emotional response level. Let's increase that vocabulary of how can I see this in a different light. And again, remember they have good intention towards you. And then start with a question. That's what I did with him is I was just like, hey, here's what I was thinking. What's your side? What did you see? What were you thinking on it? And then he was able to respond. And then I could share, oh, okay, well, I guess I was expecting this, but is that realistic? Would you be able to do that? Right. So I'm actually asking and inviting him into that expectation versus telling him you have to do this. Right. So when we need to step into a hard conversation, again, reflect first, tone down the emotions, find new vocabulary for it, think through what is the behavior that you want to address. And then always, always, always put good intention on them. Assume that their desire is to bridge the gap with you, that they do want a relationship, right? And then address the behavior and come up with an agreement. So those would be the 4 steps.
Nice. How has your faith shaped you along your journey?
My faith has honestly been the biggest part of shaping me. So I will say this, it's beautiful. So I grew up in the church. I grew up in a really good church, actually, just really grace oriented, loving people, very service minded, which is where I know I ended up getting a lot of my identity from, was really from the church in serving versus in relationship with God. So it really shaped a lot of my people pleasing that I then had to break out of later. And recognize that my number one yes has to be to the Lord and who he is in my life and what he has said. And I was replacing a lot of the value and the worth that I need to receive from the Lord and knowing who I am in him, knowing his identity and his value with me. I was replacing it with, well, I'm serving at the church, right? So then I'm serving God, right? Because I'm serving the church. It's not truly the same thing, right? Serving the Lord first comes through my place of saying, God, what is my yes to you? What have you spoken to me in this season of my life? And that gets my first yes, right? And so there are things in my life I know God has spoken. Is number one, I love to be in the word with him because scripture says in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believes in him shall have everlasting life. And verse 17 continues. This is the one people leave off. Verse 17 continues and says, and this is eternal life, to know him, the one who created you. And so it's really important for us to realize, like, man, knowing him is why I'm here. It's my purpose, is to know him. How do I know him? Well, I got to get in the word. I got to know what scripture says about him, about his goodness, his faithfulness, about this God who died and gave himself for me. So this is a huge part. Like I'll say this, that's why I kind of preface that, like, I do Christian coaching, because I will always bring the word in and bring it as our foundation so we can grow from there and come back into connection. The whole way that I created Communication Architect, when you're talking about how does my faith formed me and shaped me. So there is a scripture in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, I believe verse 18, and it says that the Lord has made us ministers of reconciliation. And so I take that scripture as something God has spoken to me to say, hey, his heart is that we reconcile, we have community, that we grow together. And so that aspect is to say, look, if I'm called to be a reconcile and draw people back together, then I truly believe it starts with communication. It starts with how we speak to each other, how we connect with each other, and being peacemakers versus peacekeepers. Because I'll say this, like, I used to be a peacekeeper, right? The people pleaser that was like, okay, well, just keep it calm. Don't bring it up. Everybody's okay, right? If everyone's okay, then it's okay and I'm okay, right? We don't want to, rock the boat, or we don't want to create conflict. And so we think we're supposed to be peacekeepers. But in the word, Jesus said that we would be peacemakers, that peacemakers will inherit heaven. I think I'll have to look at the verse again, but we're called to be peacemakers. And a peacemaker is a creator, right? You're making peace. How do you make peace? Healthy conflict, right? That's where we do have to address behaviors, where we do have to make corrections and connect with each other to say, hey, you have worth and value. And I see that in the process. I want to address this behavior that you did, because that behavior is not becoming to the person that I know you are. Right. So I'm still adding value to a person. The desire is to connect, but we want to make peace, which making peace means, hey, we're going to also talk about the hard stuff and the behaviors that need to change. We're going to set boundaries to protect our yes. So again, yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but yeah, I mean, my faith has been huge in forming my life, my trust in the Lord, my walk, connecting with my husband, even to the point that the businesses I'm building are all around that vision of reconciliation and drawing people back together, which is the heart of the Father.
I love it.
Yeah.
So you have a book coming out here in the future then, you said?
Yeah, so I have a couple books out already. You can find them on my website, communicationarchitect.org, or Amazon. I sell them on Amazon as well. But the book I usually encourage people to start with is I have a book called Boundaries. So it's setting boundaries to protect your yes and empower your no. It's The Fine Art of Saying No is the title. I apologize. The Fine Art of Saying No, setting boundaries to protect your yes and empower your no. That's a great one to start with. If you're like, hey, I struggle being a people pleaser, or my boundaries are too strict and I need to find the middle of the road to connect. That's a great one to start with. Again, if you guys even just say, hey, well, I don't want to buy the book yet, but I want the free download, right? Go get the free download, the guilt-free no from my website. And then I'm working on a book right now called Breaking Up with Shame. And I think I'll have it released probably February of next year, just in time for people to deal with, like, why am I still single on Valentine's Day? So my goal is really to kind of hit some of the singles and help them out there. So breaking up with shame, to not allow it to control and rule us when we hit that spiral. How do we take back control and choose to not let it control us?
Nice. How can people get a hold of you?
Awesome. Thanks for asking. So I would say the best way to get a hold of me is if you're on social media, connect with me on Instagram or Facebook. I'd love to actually get you into my Facebook group. I have a Facebook group called Communication Architect Community. So you can just Google that, or if you go to my website, then you'll see the link there to my Facebook. So join the group, because I like to have real chats with people. It is me. I don't have a team of people. I'm the one actually responding to you. But just to kind of answer questions, get people in the community. And then you can connect with me through my website as well. I've got a connect button there. I also have book a discovery call. If you say, hey, this is exciting, I really want to take the next step, but I don't know what I need or what that needs to look like, just get a free call with me, right? And literally that discovery call is just learning you, where you're at in your season. What are your dreams, your goals? What are the things that you want to get control of? And then we'll just talk through that in the first session, right? So it's not a sales pitch session. It's literally just meant to discover you, where you're at, and what's the game plan for moving forward. But those are some of the best ways to connect.
Awesome. And I'll drop all that in the show notes for everyone too. Is there anything we haven't covered that you want to talk about?
I feel like we covered a huge array of things, honestly. But I would probably say is just to really encourage all of you listening. If there's one thing you're going to walk away from this, I would really encourage you to sit down and write out. Literally, there's power in pen and paper. There's actually a really good book called Write It Down, Make It Happen. And in it, they tell you that because you write something down, you're 84% more likely to do it. Because when you hand write it down, there's a connection God's created in our body. And I should probably dig into the science behind this more, but it actually sticks in your brain better when you physically write. But sit down and write down, what is your yes, right? Limit yourself. If you're somebody who's like, I have 15,000 yeses, prioritize, get yourself down to 3 to 5, no more than 5. For some of you, if you say, hey, I only really have 1 to 2 yeses in this season, great. But write it down, know your yes, because once you know your yes, it will empower you to say no. It will protect your yes. So that would be my biggest takeaway from this, is just, if I could encourage everybody, sit down and prioritize or discover and think through, what are my top yeses? Again, 3 to 5, no more than 5. Or if you just have 1, but know your yes.
Great advice. All right, final question. What is one piece of advice you'd like to leave our listeners with about overcoming adversity?
Honestly, I think it would be the same. Know your yes. So when you're going through adverse times and you're really struggling, know your yes. Because many times when that adversity hits, you're trying to figure out, well, what do I do first? How do I handle it? How do I walk through this? And if we can center ourselves back to that place of like, all right, what is my priority in this adverse moment? How much does this really matter in the light of my yes, in the light of my priorities? Because potentially in the adversity, we're given a level 10 response to a level 3 problem. So maybe we need to increase our vocabulary, rethink that emotion that's attached itself to the adversity, right? Because there can be so much happening around us. But in that moment where everything is happening around us and the emotions that we're expressing and feeling, like I'm so angry or this is pissing me off, or right, whatever it is, right? Can we give new verbiage to it? Can we try to bring down that emotional level to where we can think logically, get back into our thinking brain and think through solutions and being solution minded, right? So again, sometimes it's that, let me reflect, let me get new vocabulary into this experience. And now can I walk out with that new vocabulary, a new way to see it, to move towards solution minded in the midst of adversity. And then the other piece is I especially want to call on everybody who's a believer who might be listening to this, but I want to encourage you in this. The scripture says that the Lord, that Jesus will give us peace that passes understanding. When we're in the midst of a trial, when we're going through the fire, right? All this adversity around us, it can feel impossible. It can feel like there is no peace. The world is not giving me peace right now, right? I can't just sit by a babbling brook and find a quiet moment because you're in the midst of the fire. But when you're in the midst of the fire, you can truly lean into the Lord and say, Lord, I'm going to receive right now the peace that you give, because he gives an internal peace, a restful peace, so that even though everything around us is going insane, we can live and rest in the peace of God that says, man, I'm going to choose emotionally and mentally to stay in a state of peace with him, regardless of what's happening around me. Right. And that I think is the biggest place. So yeah, sorry, I know that was a lot, but that's probably where I would do as listeners on this. Yeah.
Great advice. Tannera, I can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing your amazing insight with all of us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Likewise. Well, guys, that's going to be all the time we have here today. Remember, the only way to get what you want is go through the fire.
Amen.